Hey everyone, Sassy Mouse here, and today we'll be talking about intimacy. Valentine's Day is on Monday, and a big part of celebrating Valentine's Day is sexual intimacy. Before we begin, I do want to acknowledge that if you're single, Valentine's Day can be very draining. And I hope that you do something to pamper yourself or some other form of self-care on this day. With that said, let's talk about sexual intimacy, baby. Is that too awkward? That might be too awkward. Hopefully it wasn't just strange. Every relationship looks a little different. Lesbian relationships are going to be different than straight relationships, which are going to be different than gay relationships. Monogamous relationships will be different from poly relationships. Married different from unmarried, old different than young, and most importantly, your current relationship is going to be very different from past relationships that you've had. Thus, this advice will need to be custom tailored to your current relationship with your current partner or partners. That said, there are some common features of intimacy. The first one is consent. Although consent applies to much more than just sex and intimacy, I will be primarily focusing on sexual consent for this video because that's kind of the topic, but consent can apply in many other situations in practically every part of your life, in fact. Consent is the enthusiastic agreement to a particular activity. I want to emphasize the enthusiastic part of that. It's not true consent if you or your partner need to be coaxed into doing a particular activity. For example, if you really want to experiment with anal for Valentine's Day, your partner needs to be excited about anal too, and you need to get an excited verbal confirmation before engaging in any butt play. Consent can be rejected at any time. Going back to the anal example, if your partner asks you to stop, you need to stop immediately. You'll then need to ask them if they want to continue. If they say no, you need to stop, remove anything that is inserted in them after telling them that you are going to do so and getting their permission to remove what you need to remove, because they may need a second to get ready for that if they're just done. And then don't pursue it further at that time, because no matter how excited you are, if they're done, you need to be done at that time. You can talk about it when you're not in a sexual situation later, but just be done. And that applies to any sexual activity that your partner revokes consent for. It could be anything, even kissing. Consent applies to any new activity that you're doing. For example, if you have consent to be doing oral and you're actively engaged in that, and you want to do penetrative sex, you need to check in with your partner again to make sure that they are ready and excited about that, and that they're cool with you changing up what you're currently doing. This also gives your partner a chance to have suggestions or feedback, such as saying, hey, make sure you grab a condom, or maybe we should clean up in between doing this activity and this other activity. So getting consent gives an opportunity for your partner to give feedback and say, hey, I need these things before we can move on, or even say no entirely. Consent should be very clear. Most of the time, the best way to get consent is verbally. That doesn't mean it has to be awkward and you have to say something like, can I have consent to put my penis in your vagina, or something like that, right? It doesn't have to be awkward. You can make consent sexy. For example, you could say, would you like it if I do this? Or do you like it when I do this? Or even, are you enjoying what I'm doing? You can say any of those in a sexy way, kind of use your dirty talk, but have the dirty talk be about consent. A lot of times the way that a lot of people describe it, it sounds super awkward. Like, in the attempt to make sure things are super clear, they take out any romance or sexiness to it, but that doesn't have to be the case. It can be a sexy part of your intimate times. If you are giving consent, try to be as clear as possible. Saying yes in a sexy way, or even or yeah, can be the most clear version of it. But I do want to point out that it is not necessarily the responsibility of the person giving consent to make sure consent is understood. It's definitely better if you're clear about giving consent, but there are situations where people don't respond properly, particularly if they're rejecting consent, that can be a little bit... They just may not be able to verbalize that they don't want to do something. So it is the responsibility of the person getting consent, who is asking for consent, to make sure that they are understanding their partner's side. If they say, I'd really like to kiss you, and the person kind of freezes up or pulls away or does anything that is a nonverbal indication that they don't really want to do that, that's a sign that they said no, and that applies to any sexual activity. Some people have a trauma response, and if someone is crossing a line that they didn't expect them to cross, a lot of people who have had trauma will in fact freeze up. So this is why it's important to practice asking verbally, because it does give a better chance that someone could say no. And as we'll talk about later, building up trust can really help with someone being able to verbalize yeses and nos. But as the asker for consent, you need to be really watching, and if you're unclear, back up, let things calm down a little bit, and then ask again. If you ask for consent frequently, it will get easier and easier. Asking for consent doesn't come naturally to everyone. Some people weren't taught it, didn't have good role models, or just find it hard to kind of incorporate, but the more you do it, the easier it will become. It is a skill. The more you practice it, the easier it will be. And if you are in a longer term relationship, the more you do it, the more both sides will expect that to be a part of your intimate relationship. If you ask for consent frequently, your partner will get more used to giving consent when they are comfortable doing things, and will feel comfortable saying no if they don't want to do that. If you practice asking for consent, it'll also encourage your partner to ask back, to say, is that okay? And then you, as the person who normally asks, will also be able to give or reject consent depending on how you're feeling in the moment. Many people treat consent like it only applies to kinky sex, but consent can apply to monogamous, under the covers, lights out sex too. It applies to any time that you are going to be touching another person. All the way from hugs to being tied up and whipped, consent applies along that entire spectrum. So make sure that you're getting and giving clear messages between the two of you. The further down the spectrum, the more important it becomes, but it is just as important to get consent to hug someone as it is to whip them. Consent should start before the clothes even come off. I've been married to my husband for 10 years, and we've been together for 15. Consent has always been a major part of our relationship, and not just in the bedroom. The very first time that we kissed, he asked, A, if I had ever been kissed before, and B, if it was okay to kiss me. That started our whole relationship on the footing of, I have the ability to have a say in what we're doing, and vice versa. It doesn't have to be awkward. It doesn't. It can be beautiful and sexy and amazing to have someone who is checking in on you, or to be the person who's checking in on your partner. The more you practice, the easier and the more sexy it gets. The next part of healthy intimacy is trust. Trusting your partner is related to consent because it's easier to trust someone you know values your experiences enough to check in. But trust goes well beyond getting verbal consent. Trust allows for experimentation in all sorts of things. If you want to explore a new kind of intimacy that you have not done with this particular partner, trust is vital to doing that. It is unreasonable to expect your partner to be enthusiastic if they don't trust you. But if you have trust, many different kinds of intimacy can be explored, from straight up fantasies to just regular day-to-day intimate activities. Trust is, of course, most important with kink activities where pain or confinement are involved, but it does apply to any kind of relationship. For example, if a partner has been in an unhealthy relationship and had their trust violated by someone not respecting their personal autonomy, it can be really hard for them to do even basic things like any kind of sex, or any sex that doesn't involve eye contact and having that person have some level of control. Building trust with someone like this is very important for you both to have a healthy and joyful, intimate experience with each other. That trust has to be built slowly and over time, but if you focus on their ability to consent and making them feel safe and that they can trust you, the rewards can be quite great. Lack of trust can make intimacy unfulfilling and even potentially frustrating. If one or the other partner doesn't trust that other person, you just can't do some of the things that you might like to do because, well, there's no trust there. And lack of trust could even ruin relationships. No matter what kind of relationship you have with someone, work to build trust, not destroy it. Getting consent is an important part of building trust, but you should also try to be consistent, follow through, and be open about any concerns that you have in the relationship. Trust is particularly difficult to rebuild if cheating has occurred, and in some cases, it may never be the same as it was before. Obviously, poly relationships will approach trust differently than monogamous ones, but in any case, trust is going to be important. It's just what trust is going to look like may differ from one relationship to another. Remember, trust is only built or maintained through actions. Words cannot build trust. Actions are the only thing that can do it. So be conscientious of your actions, both in sexual activity and in your relationship as a whole. In my relationship, trust has been built up over a 15-year period. It hasn't always been the same level. It has had some highs and some lows depending on what was going on in our relationship. But over time, the general trajectory has been upward. We've been able to learn more about each other, trust each other more, and even explore different parts of our relationship with each other that we wouldn't have been able to if we didn't have trust in each other. Next, we're going to talk about communication. Communication is sort of the third part of the triangle of consent, trust, and communication. They build upon each other and work with each other to make relationships as good as they can possibly be. Communication is how you give consent, how you refuse consent. It's how you make decisions about your relationship. It's how you can express desires to do certain things or discomfort with certain ideas. Communication is important for expressing or revoking trust. Communication can allow you to explore your relationship. Being open with your partner can allow you to define the limits of your relationship. It can allow you to redefine your relationship. It can allow you to express interest in new activities. And it can allow you to clearly set hard limits, things that you are absolutely not comfortable with at all. Communication can allow you to periodically check in with your partner and make sure that things that may have been true in the past have not changed for either of you, and allow you to express interest in exploring things that maybe you weren't able to before. This can include having a frank and open discussion about your life goals and relationship, such as the desire for marriage or kids, relationship statuses such as wanting to be dedicated to each other or being fuck buddies, whether you want to explore different sexual activities such as kink or anal or even just reverse cowgirl, and whether you have hard limits on activities that you never want to do, such as oral or being blindfolded or whatever. Being able to openly communicate about these things will allow you to be on the same page as your partner. Not try to marry someone who doesn't share your goals about kids or lifestyle. And try not to engage in sexual activity that your partner is absolutely uncomfortable with. It's helpful to do this every few years with someone who you've been with because things can change. And being able to have an open conversation about these topics can really help build your relationship and make it as strong as it could possibly be. Having this open communication can also reduce frustration because neither partner will be forced to do something that they're not comfortable with. Having frank and open conversations with my husband allowed us to decide to not have kids, helped me decide to get permanent birth control, allowed us to change our intimate interactions over the years, and decide that we want to live on the road and do adventures, among other things. It's been really instrumental in our relationship to having us be as close as we are at this point and last as long as we have. We met when I was 16, and open communication has allowed us to be together all this time. Finally, you can increase healthy intimacy by individualizing your interactions. Throughout this video, I've talked about the importance of adjusting your intimacy to meet you and your current partner's needs. When you know your partner and your partner knows you, you can plan a truly romantic Valentine's Day interaction. Or any other day that you want to be romantic, if we're being honest. For example, if your favorite sexual activity is oral and your partner's favorite sexual activity is sensual massage, and neither of you has a hard limit on either of those activities, you can plan to incorporate them into your intimate time so that both of you feel satisfied and really enjoy the time you get together. If you know your partner is claustrophobic, you can avoid bringing handcuffs or ropes to the bedroom because they may not like that. If you know your partner is asexual, you can talk to them ahead of time about if they're interested in having sex at all, or if they would prefer to do some other form of intimacy, such as watching a movie and cuddling. If you like to use toys, you can make sure that they're clean and ready to go before the big day. The best sex is the sex that is designed for you and your partner. Full stop. So use the tools in this video to find out what you and your partner like and try to incorporate that into your Valentine's or other romantic day plans. I'm not going to talk about how I individualize my intimacy because it's private. But I will say that I know my partner would hate certain things, like going out to a busy restaurant for Valentine's Day. So instead, we would much rather have a nice meal at home and watch a movie in the confines of our own private space. In the same way, you can customize every part of a romantic evening to meet what you and your partner prefer, all the way from dinner to bed. I hope this video can help you have a happy and more fulfilling Valentine's Day, or even just a date night. If you are spending Valentine's Day alone, like I said, please do some self-care. I know it can be kind of stressful knowing that other people are out there having happy relationships, and it can be hard to find someone who's a good fit. I was incredibly lucky to find my husband when I did. I was very young, both of us were, and I just got, it was purely by luck. I know that that's not the norm, and many people spend potentially their entire life trying to find the right person. So if you are spending this Valentine's Day alone, please take care to do whatever you need for self-care. If you're spending it with someone else, please be concerned with their needs, because ultimately if both of you are enjoying yourself, it's going to be a lot more fun. And I wish you all enjoyable and consensual intimacy, and hope that you stay safer out there. Bye.